Season 4 of Warzone 2 and Modern Warfare 2 is here, and with it is a bunch of new updates, but probably most important is the brand new map Vondel. It's looking absolutely fantastic, and whether you're going to be playing this new map, some of the other maps we've got, or even just multiplayer on Modern Warfare 2, I thought now would be a great time to show you the updated best graphics settings on consoles. And we start with OnDemand texture streaming. Switch this on for the highest quality textures possible. The only downside is it does take up a little bit of your bandwidth, so if you don't have a great connection, consider switching this off. Then as we go down, we've got some of the usual settings I recommend here, so switching off world motion blur, weapon motion blur, film grain, as well as depth of field. These are some of the settings which dictate how cinematic the screen looks, but in terms of just seeing people more clearly, we want them off. And now we come down to Fidelity FX CAS. Now I did make a whole video on this not so long ago, but I'll summarize it quickly here and which setting will be best for you. So the CAS part here does stand for Contrast Adaptive Sharpening, which basically does some post-processing to the graphics to make them look a bit sharper. Now this is supposed to be without reducing your frames per second. However, unfortunately, it actually does reduce your FPS, and it reduces your frames per second differently depending on your console or whether you're on PC, as well as the strength that you've got here. But I will recommend for next generation console players, so the Xbox Series X and S and PS5, somewhere between 80 and 100 actually makes the game look fantastic. It looks so sharp and clean and takes about 1 to 3 frames per second off. For me, that's a pretty good trade-off. Now for older generation consoles, so PS4 and Xbox One, you'll also want this setting on, but you'll want the strength reduced quite a bit, so between 20 and 50. Unfortunately, cranking up the strength to 100 on the older gen consoles can cause some screen tearing, pretty bad graphics for some reason, and a significant lowering of the frame rate. Next up, if you do have the option, switch on 120Hz refresh rate. That essentially means that we can get up to 120 frames per second. This will only be an option for next-gen console players and PC players, and it also assumes that you've got a TV or monitor that can actually run that. Next up for field of view, go somewhere between 100 and 120. 120 is a little bit too much for some people because the screen stretches that much, things in the distance appear much smaller, and for some that makes it too difficult to see people at a distance, so they'd rather go a little bit lower. And that's absolutely fine, but I would recommend not going below 100 because you will disadvantage yourself quite significantly. Then for the sub field of view options, I recommend putting ADS field of view on affected. This means that when we aim in, we're still at the same FOV that we've just set. So if I'm at 120, when I aim in, I'm still at 120. If this was on independent, I'd go actually to 80, which is the standard default setting. Then for weapon field of view, put this on wide. This makes the weapon appear smaller, so we can see more of our environment. For camera movements, put these down to least, which is 50%. In my opinion, this gives us a much smoother experience, but most importantly, means that we can react quicker to enemies. For brightness, I recommend somewhere between 60 and 80. This may appear a little too bright for some people, especially if they like that realism aspect, but personally, I like the dark corners to be lit up, just so I can get a tactical advantage. If someone's camping in a corner, I want to see them. Personally, I find that 70 works best for me across all of the maps across Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2. For safe area, I always recommend reducing this as much as possible. This is simply where your HUD sits, so your information on the screen such as the minimap. By bringing this closer to the center of the screen as much as we can, it means when we're looking at the minimap back and forth to see where enemies are, to see where our teammates are, there's less of a distance to track from the center of the screen to that minimap, meaning we're not spending as much time doing that tracking, so we can spend more time actually aiming down our sights and responding to enemies. We're not quite done there, we want to head over to interface now, and a lot of these settings on here are going to be personal preference to you, but I would absolutely recommend going on color customization and putting the color filter to filter 2. This is a preset color palette and makes the whole game look a little more vibrant. Then put the filter target on both and the intensity all the way up to 100. I probably don't have to say it for 99% of you at this point, but if you are new to the game, make sure you've got your minimap shape on square. Doing this means that your minimap shows 25% more area. Then lastly, the few options you may want to consider are around the connection. By switching some of these on, you'll get information in the top left-hand corner of your screen on how good your connection is in that game. Now, the reason you may want to do this is that it can inform you if you've got low ping one game, or a high game, or if you're getting packet loss. This can be very useful to know to understand how aggressive you can be in a game, because if you've got, say, 60 milliseconds of latency and you're constantly getting packet loss, chances are that you can't just play super aggressive on everyone and kill them. You may have to play a little more tactically, and if it's really bad, it can show you that you probably need to reset your connection. So they're the updated important graphic settings for Warzone 2 and Modern Warfare 2. If you do want to see the updated best controller settings, check this video out. Or if you want to see the updated fastest method to rank weapons up, you can check this video out.